Hello and welcome to Formidable Over 40 podcast. I'm Sarah Pittendrigh, a mum, award-winning entrepreneur, cancer survivor, mentor and coach. In this podcast, I'll be sharing my own story of bouncing back from rock bottom to finding my why and creating 6- and 7-figure businesses. I'll also be chatting to some truly incredible guests who have harnessed their power and are testament to the ethos of this podcast, that you're never too old and it's never too late to achieve your goals and change your life. This episode features Eleanor Mills, journalist, editor, and founder of Noon, the unique platform connecting brands with women in midlife. Eleanor's journey includes being editorial director of the Sunday Times, editor of the Sunday Times magazine, and chair of Women in Journalism. She has now found Noon, a community which is empowering women to embrace midlife, with brands and experts sharing advice to help people make the right choices. Eleanor is passionate about changing the narrative around the latter stages of women's lives, embracing age diversity and reframing midlife as the age of opportunity and transformation. I hope you enjoy listening. Please subscribe, rate, and share this podcast with anyone you think will enjoy it or needs it. Formidable Over 40, you're never too old and it's never too late. Eleanor, good morning. How are you?
Oh, well, hello, Sarah. Really nice to see you and hear you on such good form. It's pretty hot down here in London. We're just at the end of the heat wave, but I'm okay. I haven't melted yet.
Well, that's absolutely fantastic. What I'd love you to do is to share with us about your journey. And the first question I want to ask you is, what does Formidable Over 40 mean to you?
Well, everything that I'm doing with Noon and that I've done as a campaigning journalist is trying to change the stories that we tell about the later stages of women's lives. It seems to me that the current narrative that we have in the wider world and the wider media is that men improve with age, like silver foxes or fine wine, is kind of often how they're described. Whereas women are often described as being like peaches, one wrinkle and they're done and they're thrown away. And for me, that has to change. Everything that I'm doing with my new platform at Noon and with my wider campaigning is to try and change that story. I want younger women, particularly those like my daughters who are in their teens, to look forward to being 50, let alone 40, to as the moment where they come into their prime. I call women in midlife queenagers. And what I see around me is so many fantastic women starting businesses, going back to retrain, maybe writing a book, doing the thing that they always wanted to do as they hit midlife. And I want us to celebrate that because I think that that would benefit all women. We have to change the current matrix of the male lens, which says that women are only important while they're fanciable and fecund. That to me is completely wrong.
Absolutely. And us queenagers, as you so eloquently call us, which is wonderful. We've got such a wealth of knowledge and so much to share, haven't we?
Oh yes, I feel like I'm just getting started. I had a massive career change myself at just before 50. And sort of formidable over 40. I think formidable over 40, over 50, over 60, 70. I see some incredible women kind of going forward. And it's such a weird thing in our society that this is a quarter of the population of women like over 40, over 50. And yet we get written out of the script.
Absolutely. So if we go back and we look at 15-year-old Eleanor, let's talk about 15-year-old Eleanor. What were her dreams and her hobbies?
Well, it's funny, isn't it? The one doesn't really change that much. Um, what did I do when I was 15? I've always been an absolute bookworm. I had read, this can sound like terrible boasting, but I'd read War and Peace twice by the time I was about 10. And I used to just like munch through classics, everything from kind of Ivanhoe to Jane Austen to Charlotte Bronte as a small child. I was always a massive bookworm. So I think at 15, I was always definitely reading. I was also a bit of a wild child, Sarah. I don't know if I've told you this, but I grew up in central London. My parents lived in Soho. And I was at St. Paul's Girls' School when I was 15. And there was a big thing, Bill Wyman was going out with the kind of 13, 14-year-old, and we were all going clubbing and behaving pretty badly, I have to say. So I was doing a lot of going to nightclubs on my child rape photo card and staying out all night and probably telling terrible lies to my mother about where I was, but having a wild time. It was great fun.
Creating memories, Eleanor, or mayhem. Yeah, was it memories or mayhem?
Both.
Noon is so exciting, and you know that I'm a huge supporter of your Noon platform. Tell us, share with the listeners about Noon, and what is the story behind you founding it?
I am a journalist. I worked for the Sunday Times for 25 years. I was I edited the magazine, as you said, but I was also the editor of the Saturday Times. I completely relaunched that newspaper. I was the focus editor, so I was in charge of all the big breaking stories. So everything from American elections to things like the murder of Damilola Taylor, huge, big British elections, the biggest stories of the week. I would be in charge of all the kind of big stuff on that. I was the comment editor. I commissioned features for the news review. So I was absolutely at the epicenter of British journalism for a quarter of a century when newspapers were still powerful. I'm afraid that their influence has waned a lot now because of the internet. So I was a real Sunday Times lifer. I lived and breathed the brand. I'd been there for years. I joined when I was 26, 27, and I had 2 kids while I was there. I was very institutionalized. And then just before the pandemic, just as my 49th birthday, I was told that my services were no longer required, which was a pretty major blow and pretty unexpected. I'd always thought that I was going all the way there and I was being groomed for a top job and I was editorial director. And then suddenly I was out. So that led to a big period of soul searching, which a lot of listeners to this podcast will understand, that there is lots of research now which shows that there's a U curve of happiness and that actually unhappiness peaks at around 47, that we hit what I call the midlife maelstrom, where we get buffeted by all sorts of different forces. So for me, that was kind of, redundancy. For others, it's bereavement or divorce or empty nest if they've had kids, or just whatever it is that you've been doing for that period between about, your early 20s and that midlife point. You kind of hit a moment where everything unravels. And I see it with so many members of my Noon community. And that midlife maelstrom for me hit with the pandemic. So I was no longer doing the job that had given me huge identity and power for a very long time. I then got COVID really badly and I was ill for about a month and I felt absolutely dreadful. I had to completely prune back my life, reinvent myself, work out what it was that I wanted to do with the rest of my life. And I think what's strange is when you've been in a job for a very long time, you actually kind of lose sight of actually what your real skills are. You become so institutionalized, you're so part of that world that it's quite weird being outside. I described it, I think, in an article that I wrote then as being like, I felt like somebody in Game of Thrones wearing a kind of huge kind of, black cloak with lots of kind of fur and gold kind of amulets, and suddenly having that taken off. So the cloak gives you this huge power and status. You take off the cloak and then it's a bit like being Darth Vader under the cloak, or it's like, well, who are you underneath this kind of thing that you've worn for so long? And actually, I found that process, although initially very horrible, scary, sad, as all kind of losses or bereavements are, and it did feel like that. Actually, I really think it's been the making of me. I've lost about 3 stone. I'm way happier. I feel like I've found my own voice and can really campaign on the things that I care about. And what I've also really learned, that actually having your own voice, being able to say what you think, not being part of a huge institution, is actually now the most valuable thing for me. And when I came out of the Sunday Times, I realized that there were so many of my friends around me were also going through this transition, and that there was absolutely nothing out there to help them with that midlife maelstrom, or something which pointed the way to what the future might look like. So I set up this new company called noon.org.uk, which is all about helping women find their next chapter in midlife, and is, a bit like me, relentlessly optimistic about the possibilities that there are, how we can move from one thing into another, and telling inspirational stories about incredible women, formidable over 40, like yourself, dear Sarah, and others who are doing incredible things in midlife. Because I think unless I'm a journalist, so I really believe in the power of storytelling. And I think unless we change the kinds of stories that we tell about women at this point, we won't change the way that society thinks about us. And what I found is that optimistic message to women saying, we're not done, you're not invisible, just because, you're not 25 doesn't mean to say that you don't have value or things to contribute, is actually really being lapped up by my queenagers, that they're absolutely so longing for a more optimistic script in our society. And that's really what I've been offering. So I've been doing that for the last 2 years, and I absolutely love it. I kind of feel like I really am my brand, that I've lived that journey myself, and the women love it. So if you haven't found us on Noon yet, do come and have a look.
And it is interesting and what you're saying, and it's about building this community. Because I often think that, especially speaking to the many women I do in midlife too, there's this element of loneliness, isn't it? And having this space to come to, and it's a me too, isn't it? That me too comfort blanket of thinking you're not alone. So it's all about empowering women. You've touched on it and there. Why is it so important to you?
Well, I think what you're saying about loneliness is really true. I think that's a really core problem for a lot of the women. But also, I think that the point about change is you can't change by doing the same things with the same people. And if you're going to move into a new era yourself, and a next chapter, then you need some new people to do that with. You need a new tribe. And really, what I'm trying to do at Noon is create a new tribe for women at this point. I mean, for many of us, if we've been in work, I mean, one of the things I really felt sad about when I left the Sunday Times was it felt like such a kind of outcasting from tribe, that had been my tribe for so long. And I see many other women, maybe if they've stayed at home with their kids, then when the kids go off to university, then that whole kind of school gate scene, that whole tribe which has been around your children doesn't exist anymore. Or a lot of women get divorced at this point, or their partners die, or they move house or something like that, which again means that you become very dislocated from the people who, have been your friends. And also, if we think about friendship, it's that old phrase, friends for life, for a reason, for a season. And often, as our season shifts, or we move, or whatever, those friends kind of some of them fall by the wayside. And I actually think that one of the really important things about finding a next chapter is finding a new tribe who will help you embrace that, because often our existing friends, or even our partners, are quite invested in seeing us the way that we are. And therefore, to move into a new version of ourselves, we need some other people who are also on that journey, or who are capable of seeing what we might become, a new version of ourselves. So for me, I went on a retreat quite early on my journey out of the Sunday Times, and I met a whole group of people who I do a meditation circle with every week. And they were not people that I knew before, and they're not really people I would probably have come across in my old kind of life, but they've been massively important and supportive in my new journey, and allowing me to explore bits of myself that I didn't know were there. And so I think that sense of giving yourself kind of the space and the kind of flexibility of a new load of people who don't know you in your own incarnation can allow you to be something new yourself. I mean, I was surrounded by such a load of cynical old hacks. There's no way I could have moved into, say, the kind of meditation and a lot of the slightly more spiritual practices, which have brought me huge strength during this time of transition. And for me, really leaning into the uncertainty has been a massive thing, and also learning to be still and to really look after myself. I swim every day, and I do Pilates twice a week, and I meditate every day, and all of those things have been incredibly important in my own transition and transformation into a new chapter. So I think that we also have to really kind of work on ourselves, and as we get older, replenish ourselves if we're going to kind of have the energy and the drive to do the creativity and the kind of, what it's like, kind of building a new business, the kind of drive that is required.
It's very important, isn't it? And you've got to invest in yourself, and so many of us in midlife, we have invested in everybody and everything but ourselves. And I think what you're saying is about, yeah, there, how you've taken self-care into your, into every day. How many people, I speak to many of my clients, and I say to them, how much time do you spend on yourself? They don't. they've forgotten. They're lost.
You can't do that though. I mean, I remember when I was at Oxford, when I was at university, I got quite ill. They thought I had glandular fever, and I went to see a really top doctor in London, and she said, Eleanor, if you're going to perform like a Ferrari, you've got to eat like a Ferrari. And she said, just eating baked potatoes and baked beans from the kebab van at 3 a.m. after I'd been clubbing was not enough to sustain brain and body. And I think that there's something in that at this point that I had spent 25 years running around like a lunatic, incredibly busy from the moment I woke up to the moment that I went to sleep on things Sunday Times kind of. I was talking to a friend yesterday who's just left one of those jobs, and I said it was a bit like being one of those Indian statues which have, those goddesses who have like 16 arms. And I felt like when I left the Sunday Times, I felt like I had 16 arms and like nothing to do. It was really weird. So I had to kind of train myself to just, I don't know, to run at a more normal pace. I mean, you can see I'm still not someone who sits around on my, lying around.
I don't think you're going to be, are you?
No, I'm
I
never
don't
going to
think
be.
you're going to be.
But
You're never going to be.
But I'm much more centered and calm now. And I also just feel much better in myself. And I think that there's something around this midlife maelstrom where I think about it like a pruning back. So when you go through all these changes at this point, whatever form it takes for you, it's a kind of, it's a bit like a big rose bush which has got really out of control, and really what's happening is you're taking the shears to your life and chopping off all the bits which are a bit dead or that have got a bit trailed out and you don't need anymore, and taking yourself back to this very kind of springy kind of green essence, that kind of vibrant green shoot that just kind of goes ring. That's what you need. You need to get rid of all the extraneous stuff, get back to that really vibrant shoot which is your purpose, your kind of core animating essence, the stuff that really makes you happy, that really gets you going. And that's a really painful process. I think change is difficult, really difficult, and we don't, as a culture, we don't think about that enough. I didn't know that. I felt awful about the fact that I was finding it so hard. I'd always been such a positive person. I felt really tearful a lot of the time, and sharing that kind of vulnerability. My daughters were amazing. Even my teenage, I was in such a bad way. Even my teenagers were sympathetic. They'd kind of come down and go, "Mum crying this morning." I'm afraid so. But I got better, and I think it was really important to be able to really express that sorrow and the anxiety around that change. And I had a lot of lovely friends who really gathered round. And it's like going down to the bottom of a swimming pool. You kind of hit the bottom and you push yourself back up again. And you will hit, and if you're lucky and you have a kind of sense of solidity in yourself and a sense of purpose, and you have lovely people around you, and you will find, and you look after yourself and you do the self-care, and you take some exercise and you look after yourself and you just calm down, you will bounce back up again.
I love your analogy about pruning, because in this society, when we read so much on social media, people are pushing and pushing and pushing. But actually, sometimes what you need to do is actually take that step right back, don't you? And take it back sometimes. And then, as you quite rightly say, leave the space for new growth, which can be daunting.
Well, all change is a kind of, if you think about the cycle of life, every death is also a rebirth. If we look at all the stories kind of going back, I'm sorry, I'm obsessed by stories, always have been. But if you look at all the stories kind of going back into the most ancient history, there's always, and it's a particularly female quality actually, that life and death are interlinked. They are the flip side of the same coin. Anyone who's given birth knows that you kind of sit on what I call the astral portal. It's where things are thin, where life comes in and life goes out, and those things are very joined. So when you have a kind of death in your life, there's also a space is cleared, like a kind of tree being chopped down in a clearing, and the space is cleared for something new. And that process of bereavement and then rotting away and rebirth and regrowth and is really important. And it's not when you get plunged into it, you find yourself in a very uncertain place, because we don't really talk about it as a society. But it is completely there. In all endings, there is a new beginning. The old cliches: when one door shuts, a window opens somewhere. And that is really true. You just need to find where that window is opening for you. And I think that if as a society we talked more about how things come to a close, how you mourn them, how you kind of go down into that kind of period. If you think about winter, where everything is regenerating. It's a wonderful picture by a German romantic painter, which when you look at it, looks black. Everything, all the branches are black, the sky is black, everything looks like it's at the end of life. And actually, when you look closer, you see that on those black branches, there are buds which are just about to come out. Yeah, so that the darkest hour is always just before dawn, and I think it's very important to remember that.
Absolutely. Now, going back then, and if we could chat a little bit about your time at the Sunday Times. What did you learn from your experiences at the Sunday Times that you've carried through into your current business?
I had a fantastic time at the Sunday Times. I mean, for 25 years, I was right at the centre of the culture. I was creating the stories that everybody out there talked about. After 9/11, I was the editor of the News Review. We were, what was going to be the big story that weekend? I commissioned Andrew Sullivan to write an enormous piece, about 3,000 words, called "Why Do They Hate America?" You were setting the context for the debate that everybody else would then have. So it was an amazingly privileged position to be in. And also, pre-internet, newspapers were the gatekeepers for all news. So all politicians had to talk to newspapers, all celebrities had to talk to newspapers if they wanted to get their story out there. So it was an amazing place. You were at the node. You were the way that the world communicated. So that was amazingly heady and fun. And I started doing that when I was 26. I was really young. I was usually the only woman in the room. And it was incredibly exciting just to be allowed to be there to pull those levers. And I learned to speak truth to power. I would have to, several times a week, present a list of all my ideas for that weekend, probably like 15 ideas, with the writers who would be writing them, to a panel of, a big kind of conference, it was called, which would have the editor and like 20 of the other most senior people on the newspaper, the economics editor, the political editor, the editors of all the different sections. And I was the news review section, so that was kind of features and comments. So that's kind of everything. And so you could be shot down by anyone around the table. Most of them were men. And I think that was the most incredibly rigorous training. I mean, nothing I do now, live TV, podcasts, writing, nothing is nearly as scary as having to present that list 3 times a week to all those men when I was really young. And I think that was such a great training in doing something terrifying, a lot. And it teaches you that you can really be on your brief, that you can argue your corner, that sometimes you can lose and you can bounce back. Teaches incredible resilience. And it was a huge training in like all the world's big issues. And on top of that, I've interviewed some of the world's biggest statesmen, from Mikhail Gorbachev to the Dalai Lama to David Cameron to Theresa May in her leather trousers to Sheryl Sandberg several times. I've been out to Facebook in Palo Alto. I've been in and out of Downing Street, a lot. I mean, I've sat in Rupert Murdoch's penthouse in New York. I mean, I had an incredible run. I always used to feel like, used to describe it as like a surfer being on a wave. I caught a wave when I was like 26, and that wave carried me actually till I was nearly 50. So I had an amazing innings, and I learned a huge amount, and I had a great time, and I worked with some incredible people. So, I'll never regret any of that. But I also am now delighted that I can use that storytelling power, the convening power, the power of that network that I created as such a high-powered editor for so long, now to drive the campaign that I really care about. And then alongside everything I was doing at the Sunday Times, I was also the chair of Women in Journalism, and we ran some really groundbreaking studies on what I call the male lens, which is, if you think about it, most newspapers are edited by old men, posh old men who mostly went to the same schools. And that means that, sorry, it's my phone alert. That means that all the news that you usually read is filtered through the way that those old men see it. So if you're a young woman and you want to get a kind of different kind of story into the newspaper, that's quite difficult. So an example would be, so I remember having some photographs taken of a very famous, beautiful older actress for the cover of the Sunday Times magazine. And she was in her 70s. She'd been very, very beautiful when she was younger. And I took the editor the pictures of her, as these beautiful black and white pictures of her as an older woman. And he didn't want to run them. He wanted to see a picture of her when she was young. And that is a completely classic example of the male lens. And that you see on everything. So when Nicola Sturgeon went to meet Theresa May to discuss Brexit, the front page of the Daily Mail the next day was, forget about Brexit, it's all about Legsit. And it had pictures of Nicola Sturgeon's legs and Theresa May's legs and who looked the sexiest. And that was kind of saying, doesn't matter how powerful you are or what you're discussing, if you're a woman, you're always going to be judged on your looks, not on the content of your character or your policy, even if you're the leader of the country. And so I've campaigned passionately around that male lens and what it meant for women in the public eye to always be seen from that male point of view. And everything I'm doing at Noon is a continuation of that, because it's about challenging that male lens and saying, actually, women, in their 50s may not, be delectable to the male lens anymore, but we still have a value. We have money to spend. We have things to offer. We have huge wisdom. We are the glue that holds society together. And we're not going to be defined by the way a whole load of old chaps see us anymore. And I feel passionately about that now. And that's something that I could never have expressed as a very, high-powered executive on the Sunday Times, because I was part of an institution which had a male lens. And I think what's also interesting is it doesn't have to have a man at the top to have that lens. Often the kinds of women who get into those positions of power are basically blokes in dresses, or they wouldn't have got those jobs. I mean, they have to be sustaining the status quo. And if you truly come in with a diverse point of view, that's not really welcome, even if they say that it is. That's what I've learned.
And I think it's a very interesting point that you made is about the wealth of the midlife woman, the disposable income that she has, very much overlooked.
Which, as you know from your work with all these midlife entrepreneurs, we're controlling a lot of money. We just did a big piece of research at Noon with the management consultants Accenture. We've done the biggest study into women in midlife, and that shows that queenagers, as I call them, are behind 90% of all household spending decisions. We spend 250% more than millennials. I mean, I know it. My girls might spend 20 quid on a pair of jeans. I'll spend 200 quid on a pair of jeans if they're going to make my arse look good. You know what I mean? So we've got the cash.
Absolutely.
We've got the cash to kind of spend if we want to, and we do. And what our research shows is that women at this point, even very successful professional ones, feel very invisible within our society. We interviewed a woman who's the partner in a law firm in London who's 50 and single and doesn't have kids, and she said to me, I just feel like I'm invisible. I feel like nobody wants to talk to me, which is crazy, because her phrase was, I'm disposable income arama. And yet brands don't want to talk to her. So it's not just about brands, but it's really important, I think, that there's this kind of missing piece of the jigsaw, which is the wisdom and the value of older women in our culture. And until we fix that, our daughters are going to grow up in a world where they think that women are only valued for being fecund and fanciful. And I think that is completely wrong. And that is the male lens in action. And that's what everything at Noon that I'm doing is about changing that and really releasing into the world that value of the female elder and celebrating it and showing what that can look like.
Here. Absolutely. And on that note, so life now is very different to corporate life. So share with us, what is a typical day like now?
Well, today I'm having a lovely day because I've got one of my daughter's friends, Leia, with me on work experience. She's sitting listening to this. And I am up in the kind of penthouse bit of my house in London, which has got an amazing view across the Hampstead Heath, which is where I work a lot. I have a kind of stand-up desk. And what do? I answer emails. I do quite a lot of podcasts. I do some TV. And what I love is that every day is really different. But the things which anchor it are every morning I wake up and I meditate for half an hour before I have breakfast. My husband brings me a really amazing coffee in bed after I finish meditating. And this morning he'd gone out and bought us cinnamon buns from the amazing bakery up the road. So I have quite a nice life, I have to say. And then at noon every day, I go and swim on Hampstead Heath in the ponds. So those are my kind of two fixed points. And then I'll often have dinner with my daughters and my husband. I've got two daughters. One's just at university, and the other one's doing her A levels studying politics. And so we have and my husband works from home too. So what's lovely for me is having spent so many years running into the office or running around the world and being very frenetic. I now really feel very entrenched in home and the kind of domesticness. And then I do a lot of talking to my Noon community. So I write a newsletter every week, which is my kind of thoughts, some of the things that I've been talking about today. And I'm just about to do a book actually all about Queen Ages for a big publisher. And I'm also going to do a podcast. I talk to a lot of brands. I sometimes work down in Soho. I go to the Groucho Club and do my meetings from there. But what I love about my life is that it's always different, and I'm getting asked to do fantastic things all the time. And then I still do quite a lot of work for the newspapers. So every week I'll have a couple of articles, in the Telegraph or Guardian or something like that, which really helps to drum up support for my campaign and for what I'm doing at Noon.
You're very passionate, and your energy is infectious. Tell me, what is your why? What is it that drives you?
I just passionately believe that women are dealt a really bad hand in life often. I think that a lot of the stories that we're told about women are absolute rubbish. And having been right in the kind of fulcrum, in the eye of the storm of the places that create these narratives, I really understand that they can be challenged. And what I've seen in my own life, I mean, I went to a kind of boys' public school to do my A levels, which was incredibly homophobic. And yet those kind of attitudes would not be acceptable now. Same on race. I mean, I was part of a really a kind of pioneering generation. I had lots of black friends and black boyfriends and things when I was growing up, and was in a very kind of multiracial, still am very kind of multiracial kind of London scene. So I think that my generation, Gen X, kind of erased that kind of homophobia and racism and things that people used to say when I was growing up in the 70s, they cannot say now, thank God. And so I want to see the same fundamental shift and change happen in respect of gendered ageism as we've seen happen around things like homophobia and around race. And I think it's really possible to change this story about what older women are for and their value. And if I can do that, and it's already beginning to work. I mean, I've seen the effects already in the culture. I've been doing Noon for kind of for 2 years. So what I'm really trying to do is to use everything that I've learned, all the context that I have, all the kind of network, all the amazingly powerful people that I know in the world because of the job that I did before, to harness that power to change this narrative around older women, for brands, for the women themselves. And what I really love is this community that I've created at Noon, where the women feel so much better about themselves and so excited and optimistic about what the rest of their lives can bring as a result of, I think, me being brave and raising my voice and saying this is ridiculous, we don't need to put up with it. And that's the way that change happens. I'm one of the other things I'm doing at the moment is I'm working with something called the 30% Club, which was founded by Eleanor Mills, which campaigned to increase the number of women on boards and the number of diverse folks in the leadership of the biggest businesses in the world. And I knew Helena when she first started that campaign. I interviewed her about it there, and I used to write about it in my column in the Sunday Times. And now, 12 years on, last week I hosted a big event at the London Stock Exchange. And when we first started campaigning around this, there were 12% of board seats were taken by women. Now that's 40% and heading towards parity. So we're not there yet, but it just shows, Helena began with an idea to hassle the chairman to put more women on their boards, to make a fuss about it in the media, to start talking about the inequity of the fact that women are 52% of the population and made up 10% of the leaders. So I think we can do the same thing with this conversation around older women. We are a pioneering generation of women in midlife, us queenagers. There have never been women like us before. And we can see that in the census in 2019. Women over 40 started earning more money than women under 40 for the first time ever. And that's because women like you and me, Sarah, have continued working while raising our children and into our midlife. And we now command considerable amounts of wealth. And we're not used to being ignored and told to shut up and go away. We're not going to have our mother's midlife. That's what all this conversation around menopause, I think, is reflecting as well, that we're getting here and going, wow, there's been a conspiracy of silence around this. Where's the doctors with the information? Where's the treatment? Where's my HRT, if that's what works for you? And that menopause is the beginning of a much bigger queenager conversation, which is about putting us front and center of the culture. And you're beginning to see that in the shift in the kinds of programming coming out of Hollywood, things like Big Little Lies from Reese Witherspoon, or Mayor of Eastwick, or the reboot of Sex and the City with the women in their 50s. We're beginning to actually see some amazing midlife queenager role models. And I like to think that I'm absolutely part of driving that revolution. That's my purpose. That's my why now.
Yeah, absolutely fantastic. And you're there championing everybody, all of us wonderful queenagers. Who is championing you? So we all know, as founders in business can be tricky and we can face challenges and it can be tough. It's not all plain sailing, is it? So what is it that you do? Who is it that you go to, or what motivates you when you're questioning your why?
I don't question my why. I sometimes
Mm.
question the how, as you know.
Yes.
And I think that what you need is some really, is people that you trust, who you can kind of go
Mm.
and bounce things off. So,
Yeah.
you and I have had some really good, robust conversations. I love Sarah. She doesn't she doesn't mince her words. We're doing a book together. I'm helping Sarah write her memoir. And in fact, she's writing most of it herself. I'm just giving her a bit of a kind of skeleton and a
You're
structure.
very supportive,
Um,
incredibly.
and and we got to know each other kind of through LinkedIn, and Sarah got in touch with me, and then we spent 2 very intense days together up in Northumberland, with me interviewing Sarah about her book, as she calls it, which I love. And we started, I think poor Sarah had started weeping within about, what was it, literally, we went up to the
A minute.
bedroom, we went up to the bedroom to start doing it. And within about 5 minutes, Sarah was in floods of tears. So we kind of met each other in a very kind of intense crucible, and we got to know each other very well. And then Sarah was asking me about my business model, and definitely saying, as a former entrepreneur of the year, that it needed some work, that I'm good at campaigning, but my businesswoman skills definitely need some honing. So that's that's how it works. You take you take inspiration and advice from people that you trust around you, and I think it's really important as part of your tribe to have people that you can go to, and also not to be afraid to ask for help. I ask for help a lot.
And it's interesting about you talk about the tribe and the connections and the collaborations and the support. On your journey, what support networks have helped you along the way?
My husband's been amazing. I've been with the same. I've been with Derek for 25 years, which is, we've just about to celebrate our 20th wedding anniversary. So he's been very, very important. Um, sorry, I've got a frog in my throat. My kids, of course. A women in journalism has been incredible. Someone said to me that. Someone said to me that your true power is what you have if you walked out of your job, today. So your real kind of power, your real assets are all the things that you have if you weren't doing your job. And I actually discovered that those things were, they're my kind of capacity to write stuff, the people that I know, and all the things that I did kind of really pro bono or out of passion while I was at the Sunday Times. So I ran Women in Journalism for 7 years, and I turned it from quite a kind of, kind of small organisation into something which was really big in campaigning. We set up a big mentoring scheme, and it's become a real old girls network within journalism, which I'm really proud of. And the power of that network and how the women support each other is really, really incredible and really works. So I think that often the kind of often we kind of create our social capital or our real power kind of along the way through the things that we do out of passion. And I've always really cared about hearing the voices of people who don't usually get heard. And I've always tried to use my position at the Sunday Times to speak up for people who didn't usually get a look in there. It was kind of how I justified being there to myself. So I did a big campaign for Britain's poorest children. We raised £2 million for Britain's poorest children through a whole load of stuff I did on the Sunday Times magazine. And I became really interested in a really awful story about children who dread the holidays because they were living on this estate in North London called the Broadwater Farm Estate, where the housing was so bad and the gangs which are on the estate are so scary that the kids couldn't play outside. So they were being cooped up in horrible flats for the whole of the holidays. Because, I was thinking about them yesterday in this terrible heat, and just thinking, we are so lucky to have lives where we have choice and possibilities, and we can walk around the supermarket maybe and not worry about how much things cost. And I'm always very mindful of the fact that I was born into great privilege, and I went to amazing schools, and I had a fantastic education, and I knew lots of people, and I was very much in the center of kind of the penguin huddle, if you like that analogy. And everything I've tried to do in my career is to widen that huddle to bring other kinds of people in. And I think that that's really important, and that's also kind of what I'm trying to do now. I think if you have been, lucky enough to have had a great education and to, know a lot of people and to be kind of quite powerful in this world, then you need to use that agency to help other people have chances. And I feel really passionate about that. And I've done that through my, work campaigning around representation of women and the male lens, and lots of stuff around social mobility. And I really care about trying to leave the world a better place than I came into it from. I come from a family of politicians and campaigners and lawyers and that kind of thing, so I think that that's very much been, maybe it's a bit champagne socialist, but it's definitely what we were bred with. That's been in our DNA.
And you mentioned there, and I mean, you are doing it, and that's very clearly giving women a voice. Yeah, you're giving women a voice. And you touched on it earlier that you've been working with me to write my book, which has been a cathartic, emotional roller coaster. I don't know how else to describe it. I don't think I can say it's been fun. We've had fun.
We've had some fun.
But I'm not sure how much
had
fun it's been so far. But it is improving. We're at chapter 6, and I think we're starting to get a little bit lighter, aren't we? In the storyline.
Yeah, but it's always the grit in the story. It's the grit in the oyster that makes the pearl. So as I said to you when we first began, we had to really dig into the depths in order to get the good stuff.
Grit. That's one thing we could describe it as. So I had to open up about my journey, and obviously I've shared about how that journey has taken me to my purpose, which is like you. I'm very, very passionate about championing the midlife woman, just midlife. I'm very passionate about championing midlife for whomever. I don't ever believe that you should dismiss your passion or your purpose for age. Yeah. So my book, as I say, is explaining how I found my purpose. How do you find the process of working with other women to share their stories? What is that process like, Eleanor?
Oh, I love it. I mean, as a journalist, I'm like a magpie for people's stories, as you know. And everywhere I go, it's like being a magpie or like a kind of sniffer dog, like a bloodhound. It's like,
Bloodhound, I would use. I think, in my experience of knowing you, Eleanor, I would say bloodhound.
Bloodhound. So I have quite a good instinct for what will make a good story, I think. I mean, that was what kept me at the Sunday Times for so many years. And still really drives Noon. So I was out with someone, I was just having coffee with a friend of mine who's an amazing woman, actually, who set up the first impact investing firm in Mexico. And she was over from Mexico because she's going off to the Tour de France to there isn't a women's tour, which I think is was a real travesty. But she is cycling the route. And so she's going up all those kind of vertical climbs. So I was going, Annie, you're an absolute nutter. Why are you doing that? And then we were talking over breakfast about how there are similarities to what she's tried to do. And she's raised 10 million quid for this fund which invests in female entrepreneurs in Mexico, which is such a macho society. So it's really amazing what she's doing. And she was saying, well, actually, there are real parallels between why I love climbing mountains on my bicycle and how I've set up this fund. And I was suddenly like, that's great piece. So I was like, she's going, I'm flying to Chamonix today. And I was like, yeah, you're going to write me this article on the plane. And she has. It will be up on Noon next week. So I just think it's just being aware everywhere that there are fantastic stories and kind of sniffing them out and then getting people to write them for you. I mean, that's just what I do. So, but I love a story. I think a story is the most powerful thing in the world, and that if you can get people to kind of really engage with the story and understand that things can be different, we can tell stories which do change the world. And that's what I've seen all the way through my journalistic career, and that I know can happen. I mean, just on the cycling thing, I was at the Sunday Times when we uncovered Lance Armstrong, and that all the lies he was telling about kind of doping and drug taking, or the kind of cash for question stuff. I mean, I really believe that if you tell different kinds of stories, you can really change things. All the stories that we told about these poor kids in the Broadwater Farm or in Blackpool did actually change their lives, because we managed to raise a whole load of money so that the kids who lived in those flats now have a fund, which means every summer they can go out of London and go and spend some time in tents and understand the natural world. So I just think you have to believe that you can change the world for the better, and then harness the skills you have to try and make that happen.
Absolutely. And to do that, we talk about confidence and self-limiting beliefs, and it's um have let's I need to ask you, have you ever suffered from self-limiting beliefs, or do you ever have a shake of confidence? And if you do, how did you, or if you had, how have you overcome them, or how do you deal with them?
I think everybody has self-limiting beliefs. My stepmother was Tessa Jowell, who is a MP and a politician, and she used to say it's really important to do something terrifying every day. And my co-founder on Noon sent me a card when we first kicked off, which said, "Do something that scares you every day," and she'd written inside, "Only one." So I think that it's really important to understand that even people who appear confident, and lots of people say to me, "Oh my God, you've been so brave in setting up Noon and doing what you've done," but I haven't been able to do that because I'm not scared. I am scared, and I often feel quite nervous about how things are going to land, or I've also felt really kind of exposed or kind of quite vulnerable. But I also know that sharing a bit of that vulnerability or sharing that truth connects. One of the things, maybe one of the things that I learned as a columnist on the Sunday Times for many years is that if you really believe something and you write it from the heart, that will always connect with an audience. If it really matters that much to you, there will be others people that it connects with too. So I think I have a confidence that if I care about something or I think something's a good story, other people will, because that's how I earned my living for 20 years. But I think we all have self-limiting beliefs. I mean, you really helped me with one of them, because I was worried about how I start to monetize the community that I've built. And having spent 25 years at the Sunday Times as an executive, we were one of the first newspapers to bring in a paywall and try and make people pay for the content, which was difficult because all the other news sites at that point were free. And it was really hard. And therefore, I had a real sense that it was going to be very hard to get women to pay for what I was doing at Noon. And you said to me, "This is ridiculous. Of course they'll pay." And actually, about a week after I came down from seeing you in Northumberland, I did. I put on a paywall on my Substack newsletter, and since then, it was only a couple of months ago, I've made over $10,000 in annualized revenue from people paying for the content, which I just didn't think they would do. So I think even people who look quite confident and look like they know what they're doing can have self-limiting beliefs that they don't necessarily see. And so that's where we all need a team, a tribe, a coach, a friend to go, "No, you've got this, you can do this." And it's why Noon is a community which is created to support so women can support each other on this journey. And we run retreats and we run masterclasses and we run a noon circle and a book club and all those kind of things. We do walks so that the women can get together, meet each other, support each other. And I see myself as the kind of, maybe queenager cheerleader, kind of, standing
Yeah.
at the front going, roll up, we can do this. This is, these are the arguments. And then when you put it to people, they go, yeah, it's really shit that society makes us feel bad about ourselves. This is ridiculous. I mean,
Yeah.
but it's just a construct in the same way that now it's not all right to be racist or to be homophobic. I want to make it not all right to be kind of sexist about kind of ageism or to judge women on their looks as they get older. And it's not just external judgment as well. It's how most importantly, how we feel about ourselves, and what I call internalized misogyny. And the way that we can sometimes be our own harshest critics with that male lens judgment that we've all imbibed. And women can be really bad at that. I mean, think about how many women read the Daily Mail and ingest all that stuff and take it to heart about, I don't know, chubby ankles, cankles, or kind of, bingo wings or whatever. I mean, rubbish. We don't need to believe all of that. We can free ourselves from that lens and that kind of thinking if we choose to, and if we tell different kinds of stories.
And there'll be many listeners, I would imagine, who'll be sitting there thinking, that sounds easier said than done. How do you how would you suggest to them that if they're sat there feeling, lacking in confidence and they've got self-limiting beliefs, but there's something that they really want to do, they're passionate about it, but fear is stopping them pushing it over the line. What advice would you give to them, Elma?
Get some help. Start talking to your friends about it. Come and join a noon circle. Look at what we're doing. Read some other people's stories. Most importantly, nail your courage to the sticking post, and you won't fail. Fortune favours the brave. You've got to get on with it. We only have one life. No point in sitting there wishing that you'd done things when you're dead.
That's right.
Don't
Exactly.
don't let fear stop you. In fact, I remember when someone said to me when I left the Sunday Times, "What would you do if you weren't afraid?" It's a great question, and just think about what you'd do if you weren't afraid, and then think, well, sod the fear and just get on with it and start making a plan.
Who wants to lie on their deathbed saying, I wished I had? We want to be saying, I'm glad I did.
Also, sometimes you try things and they don't work out, but you always learn something
Yeah,
from trying it. And also, I think that people respect you for making an effort, and and what is failure anyway?
exactly. You either win or you learn.
We always learn, and sometimes you win, or sometimes the win is not what you thought it was going to be. I mean, I thought when I left the Sunday Times that was a terrible failure. I now think actually it's the best thing that ever happened to me. I've never been happier or more excited or more full of purpose.
Yeah. It's become the win, though. It's become your win.
It's become a win, yeah, exactly. But it felt like a failure. So in the same way that we were talking about, in death there is resurrection and life. In failure there is the seeds of success. Was it? You get it in chitty chitty bang bang. Out of the ashes, come the roses of success. From the ashes of disaster come the roses of success. There you are. You made me sing. We've got to be near. We've got to be near the end now.
Fabulous. That's got to be a first. I've got Eleanor singing on the podcast. So in talking about priorities, because you've had a busy career, you're a wife, you're a mum. How have your priorities changed over the course of your life?
I tell you what I think.
Yeah.
I think now, I think when you're younger, you prioritize maybe external status. Certainly in my family, everything was about external status, achievement. That was kind of what got you brownie points. Um, but now, I was offered a job recently to go back into newspapers, kind of where I was before, and I didn't even pursue the process because I just don't want to do that. And what I've learned is that my having control over my own voice, my own message, not having to run any of my ideas by some older man and feed it through the male lens is actually the sweetest thing for me. And that it doesn't matter how much money someone's going to pay me, or I'm just not prepared to give that up. And that is now absolutely at the top of my value tree. And that can never be taken away from me again. And that's what really matters. So I think that that's also what this kind of crucible of the midlife maelstrom does, is it really makes you batten down what your priorities are. And we saw that in our Queenager research, that we talk about the women being forged in fire. Over 50% have been through 5 massive life events. But the ones who've been through the most are the happiest, because they've now rejigged their lives along their own purpose and values, as you have too, Sarah. So, I think it's a hard road. There are times when the fire burns and it really hurts, and you feel like you might want to give up. But um, it's actually that kind of soldering process, that going through the fire, that gives you the confidence and the wisdom to pursue your own path.
Absolutely. And who do you take inspiration from, Eleanor? Who inspires you, or what inspires you?
Great writers, books, people that I
Mm-hmm.
meet, um, my kids and their amazing friends. I feel such a sense of kind of hope in the Gen Z generation. I think they're amazing, really care about things. They're so much more kind
Mm.
and considerate of each other. I think their attitudes to relationships are kind of much more honest. They really care about the planet. I see so many of them who are so clever and lovely and passionate. I really hope that they'll save us all. And I feel really guilty that our generation have been so useless on the big challenges.
Well, on that note, it has been an absolute pleasure, as always, chatting to you. But I'd like to ask you one more question. Paying it forward. So it's time to pay forward. What is the biggest piece of advice that you would give to other people embarking on a journey of reinvention or finding a new direction?
I think the first thing is be kind to yourself. The second one is, you don't have to know exactly what you're doing. That it's a kind of weird process, that if you really have a kind of passion for something and a purpose, you're a bit like a spider spinning a web. And but when I started out doing Noon, I didn't really know how it was going to work, or what it was going to look like, or how I would make the money, but I really knew what I wanted to do, and I knew that I had an incredible network that I could leverage. And so yeah, I think it's a bit like if you're swimming a long way, you just got to get in the water and start swimming. You just got to you got to start doing it. Go and meet someone for a coffee, ring somebody up, look at something that somebody else is doing that you think is interesting. Just begin to spin that web. Everything that you do will add towards it. Start having conversations. You can do it. But nobody really talks about, and I think the book that we're doing with you is really interesting on this, is that you were talking about how you set up your Simply Bows company, that you just got to start somewhere, and don't worry that it's not going to be perfect to begin with. Sheryl Sandberg's got this. She always says done is better than perfect, and also that it's always impossible until it's done. And all these journeys begin with, yeah, it begins with a single step. So don't be too hard on yourself. Don't think it's got to be perfect to begin with. Just start doing something. Have an idea, get out a notebook and write in it, what do you really want? I see so many women who get to this point and they've kind of forgotten what it was that they liked or they wanted to do, or what the dreams were that they started off with. So just kind of start off with a blank page about what you really care about, because I tell you what I can promise you is, if you structure your life and your working life and your business around something which is a passion, it means that everything you do feels enjoyable. You were saying, what are my days like? Basically every day I'm doing a whole load of stuff that I really love, because it wouldn't be in my diary if I didn't want to do it. And that is the greatest freedom and joy. So it's really worth it. Don't Rome wasn't built in a day. It will take a while. Keep spinning the web, keep having the conversations, keep thinking about it, and you will get somewhere, even if it feels at first like you're swimming in the dark.
Absolutely. Eleanor, it has been an absolute pleasure. Where can our listeners find out more about Noon?
So we're Noon, as in the middle of the day, .org.uk. It's called Noon because in the 100-year life, 50 is halfway through. So we're only at noon in our lives, so it's time to get on with it. And if you're interested in my newsletter, that's on Substack. So if you go to Eleanor Mills .substack.com. In fact, if you go onto the Noon website, it says, do you want to sign up to the Queen Ager newsletter? And Queen Agers get lots of, we have great deals with like beauty companies and events and all those kind of things for our And we do a book club every month where people get a free book if they become part of my paid subscribers community, which Sarah very much encouraged me to create. So since I'm on her podcast, come and become a paid subscriber queenager and all goodies shall be yours. We're worth it.
You are absolutely worth it. Thank you ever so much, Eleanor.
It's a great pleasure. Thank you, Sarah. And it's always a joy to talk to you. And thank you.
You too. Thank you.